Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's 2 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to first thank everybody for joining this course titled, What is the Department of Mental Health Behavioral Health Strike Team, and How Can I Request It? Please feel free to use the chat feature during this presentation, and we'll go ahead and cover questions and answers throughout the presentation. It's my pleasure to introduce our hosts for the day. We have, with the Department of Mental Health, Becky Geer and Alyssa Backus. Over to you, ladies.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Really happy to be here with you guys today. Good afternoon. I'm Becky Geer. I'm the Director for the Office of Disaster Services for the Missouri Department of Mental Health. We're going to give you just a quick introduction to who we are. Some of you may know us. Some of you may be meeting us for the first time. So welcome virtually. If I haven't met you, it's nice to meet you. And if I do know you, it's nice to see you back again. So I've been with the Department of Mental Health for about 16 years. I've been doing disaster services since 2016, I believe it was. End of 2015 floods, I walked right in and was handed a flood. It was literally sink or swim. And so the swim I did into those flood waters, and feel like we've been doing disaster response almost every year since then. I have a background in criminal justice, but my passion, I will tell you, lies with disaster behavioral health. I feel like it took me many years to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, and disaster world was where it is. So that's a little bit about me, very quick overview. I'm going to toss it to Alyssa real quick to introduce herself.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Becky. As she said, my name is Alyssa Backus, and I am the Deputy Director of the Office of Disaster Services. I have been with DMH since 2019. And as she likes to put it, she stole me from SEMA. I worked at SEMA a couple different times, actually, working in emergency human services, one under Dante Glenecki and then under Deb Hendricks. I was a medical reserve corps coordinator for a little while. In between those two routes, I worked Scott Trade in St. Louis doing business continuity planning. I went into emergency management after I did a medical mission trip to Haiti, whenever that was. That's terrible of me. 2011? Does that sound right? So then I decided to go to school in emergency management to do emergency management at Central Methodist. Oh my goodness, I am losing it. University of Central Missouri, Warrensburg. I think that's about it for me. I'll just stop there.
All right, thanks, Alyssa. So we're going to talk to you about the Behavioral Health Strike Team with the Missouri Department of Mental Health, talk to you about what it is, why we created this, how to request it, what the benefits are to it, and also some of the challenges that we have seen with the Behavioral Health Strike Team. Please go ahead. If you have questions, feel free to put them in chat. I do have the chat open. I think I can actually see it. Alyssa will probably monitor the chat while I'm talking, and vice versa. When Alyssa's talking, I'll try to monitor the chat. But we have plenty of time for questions at the end as well. So to give you a little bit about what the Behavioral Health Strike Team is, the whole purpose of this is to be able to have a group of trained behavioral health team members that we can deploy when requested in order to provide psychological first aid to folks who've been impacted, whether that's survivors or responders or family members of those who have passed from the disaster. Overall, we know behavioral health is a very big need for most folks on a good day, and you add bad times to this, and it creates some stress. So we want to be able, in the aftermath of crisis, emergency, or whatever that disaster is in the state of Missouri, to be able to provide support. And that is the overall purpose and reason we created this strike team. The other reason we created that is that there are a number of disaster behavioral health experts who for years and years and years now from disasters have studied how we can best help survivors after a sort of disaster or terrorism, some sort of a critical event. And we have found that it includes really these 4 stages in a post-disaster stepped care model. So we know in the immediate hours and days and even sometimes weeks following a disaster, information is critical, and that is the stage that folks are going to be in for those immediate days, hours, and weeks after an event. They are seeking different types of information, whether that's information about what happened, information on resources, information on where they can go to meet their basic needs, whatever that is, information in general. Then we know in the hours, days, and weeks following the disaster, there's a smaller part of the population that are going to need additional support, and we offer them psychological first aid, or what we call PFA. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but it's important here to remember that it is, as you see this kind of goes down, the population, while a large group of us need information after an event, a smaller portion of us need additional support, and that continues to go down. And so we have SPR, which is Skills for Psychological Recovery, which is essentially helping in the weeks and months after an event build skills around coping, skills around coming to terms with your new normal after an event. But also very few, and it's about 10%, will need any sort of mental health treatment or substance use treatment after a disaster. It's a very, very small percentage. Most folks, we can provide information in the initial aftermath, PFA, and that will suffice. Occasionally, we need to give some additional support. And so our behavioral health strike team really fits into the information stage and moves into that PFA stage. We have additional services in declared disasters that we can provide through crisis counseling for that SPR and treatment piece. But initially, we want to be able to provide information in PFA as quickly as possible to help with the recovery journey. So here's a little bit of history about our behavioral health strike team. In 2017, I went out on the East Coast for a training event out at Emmitsburg, and this was a concept that was talked about a lot out there, and it kind of piqued my interest. I brought it back and I said, hey, can we do this in Missouri? Is this something we can look at really implementing? And so we started kind of running with the idea, how would this work for Missouri? How would we make this look? And so we hosted 2 disaster summits, one in 2017, one in 2018, where we brought in federal partners from different agencies, FEMA, SAMHSA. We were also able to bring in other states. So New Jersey has a strike team similar to this. Connecticut used it in a mass casualty event for a school shooting. And we were able to pull in these states and say, how did this work for you? How did you develop this? In addition, we pulled in other responses we did. So thinking about the Joplin tornado, how did we do this there? What could have worked better? What would have helped our responders, our survivors? And the Branson duck boats, which we tested our concept of operations at, but we really talked about how to make that work better. And so we brought all these folks together. We pitched the ideas. We did almost some different types of tabletops to kind of work out the weeds. We brought in folks from FEMA. You can see in one of the pictures there, many of you may recognize Deb Hendricks sitting there. But we were just really trying to take our lessons learned and develop this into a way that would work. And so when the Branson duck boat mass casualty incident happened, we were requested to deploy down to Branson, and we went down with our team of folks from Burrell Behavioral Health who had some specialized training around mass casualty incidents. And we were able to really see, okay, does our concept of operations work? Some things worked really great, as with every disaster, and some things, as you guys know, were not what we really planned for, and so we had to kind of adjust that system. It also helped us figure out how we would deploy our folks. So we started thinking about using the Show Me Response system. How could we utilize that and create a specialty within the Show Me Response system to deploy our strike team? We also utilized our strike team members that we were slowly starting to build across the state to exercise in the repatriation exercise in, I believe that was in 2019. I know you guys understand that all the years are starting to run together now, but I believe that was 2019 we exercised the repatriation exercise at the convention center where we pulled in our strike team. So we were really starting to see this concept and the dream that we had start to take shape. So to tell you a little bit more about what that looks like and where our concept of operations come from, I'm going to toss it to Alyssa.
Thanks, Becky. Okay, so concept of operations for the Behavioral Health Strike Team, DMH, which is us, Office of Disaster Services, Becky and I deploy with the Behavioral Health Strike Team. It will act as the lead on ground on the site. Behavioral Health Agency Behavioral Health Agency contacted and asked to supply trained team members and support. That just means that we will reach out to agencies within the area who can provide those trained behavioral health strike team members. And again, I should preface this by saying that not always will they be behavioral health strike team members, because Becky said we are still a work in progress. Our team is still a work in progress. Not everybody will be trained for specifically the behavioral health strike team. They won't have had our required trainings. So we will reach out to agencies in the area that's been impacted who can provide those members that have the background. Sorry, I was reading Becky's thing and I shouldn't do that. I'm still looking. Community Mental Health Center, CMHC, Community Mental Health Center. We have a community mental health center in every single county across the state. There are numbers of them. Some have more than one county, but they are the community mental health center for that specific county. They'll provide a direct liaison. Like we said, those behavioral health agencies will provide us a behavioral health strike team member or just someone that has some sort of training that they feel can assist us from that community mental health center to that deployment. And then the team deploys nearest. So I kind of touched on that already. Whoever is nearest to the incident will be the one to deploy, either a behavioral health strike team member or someone they feel qualified to do so. Next. More concept of operations. Team members could deploy anywhere from 1 day up to 2 weeks for 12-hour days. Becky and I have kind of talked about this a little bit. That could change. We haven't had a lot of deployments, but as we learn more, that might change to a shorter amount of time, whether that be 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, maybe not necessarily a full 2 weeks. Again, something that we're working on. DMH manages logistics communications during deployment. So at least one of us will deploy to the incident, or where we're setting up for the incident, and then maybe the other stay behind and do kind of behind the scenes type things, getting back to our leadership on what's happening on the ground. DMH will work with the incident commander or whoever that may be, or we'll work with DMAT, incident commander, or the Missouri mortuary, or even the local emergency manager to support the incident. So we'll be the strike team lead, basically working with that incident commander, whomever that may be. Behavioral Health Strike Team is working to add disaster chaplains to the team. I think it was it the pandemic? No, Amtrak derailment that we had a chaplain or two deploy. Is that right, Becky? Was it the Amtrak deployment?
Yes, 2. Yeah, 2.
Okay, 2 of them. So work in progress for this team, but that is the plan to include disaster chaplains to those teams. Next. Logistical support. So DMH will manage the logistics for behavioral health strike team members. I do want to say that, so the Community Mental Health Center will provide the folks, whether they be trained or not, but they will have to pay for their own salary. Whoever is requesting the behavioral health strike team to come in and deploy, our hopes is that they will continue to provide lodging if need be, provide meal reimbursement, provide mileage reimbursement, those sorts of things. Again, I hope that continues the way it has in the past. That is how it has been going. But the CMHC will cover their salaries, the employees' salaries. Community mental health center submits the invoices for expenditure costs with documentation. They submit it to DMH. DMH will then turn around and submit that documentation to the requesting agency, whoever requested the behavioral health strike team to deploy. So that's how that will work. And then DMH ODS also plans for additional deployments. So if this is going to be like a 4-week thing, if it looks like it's going to extend out even longer and our folks have already been deployed for 2 weeks, or 5, 10, 7, whatever it may be days, we will be coordinating in the background a new team to help relieve those folks. And then trainings, required courses, we will have these 4 listed required courses: psychological first aid, basic NOVA, National Organization for Victim Assistance, and then ICS 100 and 200. I'm sure many of you are well aware of what ICS 100 and 200 are, but just the psychological first aid, it just kind of focuses on that immediate aftermath or immediate aftermath of a disaster, and to help reduce stress, immediate stress, and then to try and help individuals cope with what's happening. So that's one of the required courses. And then basic NOVA training, which I took the advanced training. Becky and I both took advanced training last week, which is on our approved, not required topics, or not required courses. The basic is crisis response training. It helps us to deliver critical education and emotional first aid following a mass casualty or some sort of natural disaster. So those are our 2 required courses on top of the ICS 100 and 200, just to give our folks basic understanding of how a response is supposed to work, how we fit into that incident command structure. So just asking for the basics there. And then annually, we will ask that our behavioral health strike team members take 2 other courses on the following approved topics. I won't read those out. But I will say that we have also scheduled for 2023, and I think this is the first time that we've actually done a behavioral health strike team focus training. So we'll have 1 in April and 1 in June coming up in 2023 that we'd like to focus on school shootings. That's going to be it's going to happen at some point, unfortunately. So we just kind of want to get that conversation going now. I think that's all I wanted to talk about on trainings.
All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about past deployments then that we've done. Some of you may have worked with us in past deployments. Some of you, may have heard of what these deployments were. As I mentioned earlier, this is where we tested our proof of concept, right, in the Branson Duck Boat event, where we were able to go down and say, okay, does this work? If we deploy with folks, can we act as the logistic person to do the coordination between the ICS system and our strike team folks? How is this going to look? And it really worked well. So that was our first deployment. We then deployed twice during the pandemic. Ironically, we were supposed to be hosting training for our behavioral health strike team members when the pandemic happened in March of 2020. Instead, we ended up deploying them a month later. So we deployed some folks to the alternate care site in St. Louis. We also deployed some folks to the Dignified Transfer Center in St. Louis, both in April 2020. Both of these deployments were also very successful. They were small in scale, meaning we only needed to deploy a couple members, but it worked really well. And you can see one of our members standing with a medical team member over here in the picture. And you can definitely tell that's from 2020 with all of the PPE they're wearing. The last time and most recent time we have deployed was in June of this year with the Amtrak train derailment. And that was a request that came in, and we were able to deploy to the school, and then we ended up deploying to the Family Assistance Center that was held in Columbia, Missouri, and we're there for response for the week. Again, another smaller scale deployment for us, but thankfully, but also a successful deployment where, again, we had some lessons learned. All of these deployments came through requests from SEMA, and Alyssa is going to talk a little bit more about that in a couple minutes with how to request, but just so you guys are aware, there's just a couple ways to request deployments, and Alyssa will go through those, but those were some of our previous deployments that were very successful. So other considerations with the with the Behavioral Health Strike Team. So we use the Show Me Response system, which many of you are probably familiar with. Within the Show Me Response system, we have created a system that allows us to track behavioral health team members or strike team members, as well as almost like a tiered system within there that we can do specialization. So I believe it's the next slide. I'll talk a little bit about some of the specializations we have within the strike team. And we're able to track what kind of trainings they have, hold their certificates, and it really is a great spot and a great system for us to be able to say, okay, here's how many people we have trained right now, here's the trainings they've had, here's the specializations, but also be able to drill that. We do annual drills. We actually do them probably closer to twice a year, biannually, to make sure that our folks are staying up to date in Show Me Response, because if you guys haven't used Show Me Response, it can be a little tricky the way you get the notifications. So we want to make sure our behavioral health strike team members actually respond when we deploy them. We also have that tiered training program, as Alyssa mentioned. We have specific requirements that folks have to take. We also know that there's some folks who have other crisis training that we may be able to utilize in a deployment. So, for example, as Alyssa alluded to earlier, we have people who may not have gone through our strike team trainings, but they may have other trainings that we can utilize and still put them out into the field during a deployment. We did recently add in the SEMA disaster chaplains. Eric Evans was critical in working that and gathering up the team with Chaplain Gilmore and others to get those folks ready to deploy. And they did. We had two, as Alyssa mentioned, deploy with us in Minden, and that was very successful, and I have no doubt we will continue to use them in the future. So a challenge here, though, is funding. As you guys know, in everything that happens, right, I feel like funding is just always a challenge. And because we never know when disaster is going to strike, funding is a continued challenge. How do we pay for trainings? How do we get money to continue to operate and keep folks coming in? In addition, how do we keep people interested? So before the pandemic started, we had 150, 140 people that were part of our strike team, and that was great. We were continuing to grow, and then the pandemic happened, and we saw the great resignation that happened across our country, right? And then we're still seeing that. And so just like everybody else who's struggling to find employees, we are struggling to find volunteers and folks to join our strike team. So our numbers have actually dropped from 140, 150 down to about 80 members. So a big challenge for Alyssa and I this coming year is to do recruitment and to get out there and really get more team members trained up. We're really excited about it. I say that it's a challenge, but it's something I think we can do. Our goal, quite honestly, is to be very similar to the state of New Jersey. The state of New Jersey has a team that they have into the thousands of individuals that are trained to deploy, and they not only deploy in their state, they deploy around the country. And I would love Missouri to build up to that capacity. But again, it takes time, so we're going to continue to do what we're doing now. The types of events we deploy to is something I want to highlight here as well. So as you probably noticed, the types of events we've deployed to have been mass casualty events. We had the Branson Duck Boat event. The pandemic was an alternate care site, so a medical type situation. The dignified transfer facility is a morgue. So we were deploying there to help the family members and the responders. And then the Amtrak train derailment was a mass casualty event. So we've got very specialized types of events that we have deployed to, but we also know we can deploy in natural disasters. So we expect to, as we continue to grow and build this, that we will be able to deploy folks out to other types of events. Specialties inside of excuse me, the Behavioral Health Strike Team. So prior to building the Behavioral Health Strike Team, we had a VIC team, the Victim Information Center team. And you can see pictures of them down here on the bottom of the screen. You've got some of us from DMH. You've got some behavioral health team members of the VIC from Ozark Center. You have some MOMORT members here. So a good group of us that have worked together to build the Victim Information Center. So when a mass casualty incident happens and we need help to identify the bodies, we would stand up a Victim Information Center. That Victim Information Center has very specialized qualifications for the team members who are going to be part of that care team that walk through the process with the family, that work on delivering death notifications with the Highway Patrol. And so we have taken that VIC team and those folks who are part of that VIC team and included them as a specialty within our Behavioral Health Strike Team, so that we know if a large-scale event happens that a VIC needs to stand up and we are requested to go in, we are going to be able to go into that Show Me response system and pull those specialized trained individuals to deploy. We also have a group that has been looking into repatriation, and those are the folks that are in, some of the folks that are in the top corner here of the screen in the picture, and that was at that convention center exercise that we did a couple years ago now. So folks that are in the St. Louis area that we are specifically involving in our Behavioral Health Strike Team, but are specifically training in repatriation and to that response, because that will be a very unique situation, and we want them to have specialized training in that. In addition, the schools is an area, as Alyssa mentioned. Through NOVA, the National Organization for Victims Assistance, they deploy a lot. They just got back from Florida. They've been all over the country to respond to mass casualty events for school shootings, as well as Vegas. They've just done a lot with this, and they're quite an amazing organization with special training. And so we are going to have their folks come in and train our strike team members about what response looks like to school shootings, what to expect, what to know, what's going to be helpful, what's not going to be helpful. We just really want to be prepared as possible. And so a very specialized portion of our training in the spring will center around that, so that we can then start adding that into a specialty area of the strike team. I do see a question here in the chat of how do you volunteer and what are the requirements. So we'll get to that here in just a minute. I believe at the end, if we haven't answered that, we will address that again. So hold on, Earl. I will definitely address that here in just a couple minutes, but I'm going to, toss it over to Alyssa to talk about how to request in the last couple slides.
All right, so how to request the Behavioral Health Strike Team. So folks are encouraged to request through SEMA, the EOC, or DHSS ESF 8, Health, Medical, Mental Health, that ESF. Again, we encourage you to go that route. Some instances where we have used that, or where it's been requested, again, MOMORT, which is through SEMA, for the duck boat incident. DMAT requested us for Dignified Transfer Facility and the alternate care site during the pandemic. And then also Amtrak situation, the Amtrak derailment. I believe it was a regional coordinator that reached out to us to deploy our Behavioral Health Strike Team for the Amtrak derailment. Again, all three of those have been through SEMA. I don't know that there's an instance where it's been where we've been requested through DHSS or the actual ESF 8, but it is a possibility. One other thing that's not on here is very possible, maybe likely, would be through the governor's office, and we're talking probably a very large scale event that it would happen coming from the governor's office, a request for a Behavioral Health Strike Team coming from the governor's office. So those are the two main ways to request a Behavioral Health Strike Team. They'll get a hold of us if that request comes through, just like it's done in the duck boat incident and the pandemic and the Amtrak derailment. Resources. So Office of Disaster Services is on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. So please go follow us. That would be most excellent. It's linked to all sorts of different resources for coping, stress management. We've got a separate web page for Behavioral Health Strike Team, which is down there at the bottom of this slide. You can see our website address there, as well as a QR code if you'd rather use a QR code, and then some trauma-informed care courses that we have provided for you as well. We also, down there with Behavioral Health Strike Team webpage through ODS, we also have a quick fact sheet that gives some quick facts about the requirements for you to join the Behavioral Health Strike Team. Am I missing anything there? I think so.
Nope. I think you got it all. So yeah, I think we can do questions, and so I do want to address Earl's question of how do you volunteer and what are the requirements. So I'm going to kind of flip backwards for a minute to the trainings. So right now we currently only use our community mental health center staff to deploy. However, we do want to build, as I mentioned, my vision is that we eventually grow, that we have folks that are willing to be part of this, trained up, and are able to deploy as volunteers. We aren't quite there yet. That doesn't mean we can't have folks who are interested apply and tell us their qualifications and attend these trainings and volunteer your time. The difference is as community mental health center staff, they get a paid salary and it's part of their job to deploy and come out as part of that team. Whereas if you volunteer, you wouldn't have that. Now, that doesn't mean we couldn't find lodging or meals or things like that, but it wouldn't necessarily be a salary. And these, again, are the required courses. So you would need to be able to successfully complete basic NOVA, psychological first aid, and of course, the couple ICS courses that we require, and then annually take 2 trainings a year, because we do expect our folks to continue to broaden their education for the strike team. If you are interested in that, you can, I'm going back, sorry, email Alyssa or I, either one of us. Our emails are on the screen here and we can give you more information. Behavioral health strike team, oh, thanks, Ashley. I was trying to see, yeah. Okay, I was trying to see if there were any other questions in the chat. So I think we've covered our strike team, how to deploy, and kind of given you the general overview of the strike team. Are there any questions? You can come off mute, you can put them in chat. We'd love to have a conversation about, to address any questions you might have.
Okay, so I kind of have a question. Where did this idea come from? Like, how long has it been in the works? How did this all start?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in 2017, I think it was 2016. I think it was 2016. I went to Emmitsburg out to EMI, and it was something that came up in the training I was in out there as a need. And I brought it back to the state and we started talking about it. And so that was really what spurred it on. Then as we started really looking, we found that there were states that were doing something very similar. They just call it something different. We went with the strike team concept because that is what was recognized and utilized in emergency management. Sometimes we get some pushback about utilizing strike team as the name, but it's where we are, it's what we've done, so we've branded it. But yeah, that was where it started and where it came from in 2016. And it probably took us 3 years to get that off the ground successfully because we didn't want to rush it. We wanted to do it right. And so we spent a lot of time having conversations with our federal partners and with our other states and our counterparts in the other states to really learn about what they did, what went well, what didn't go well. And I feel like we are still learning that, right? Like every deployment, every disaster we know is different. And so there's something we learn in everyone. So I think it will continue to grow, and it'll continue to shift based on the needs and what we're seeing, because we know there's a lot of need out there, and it's just not, it's not getting, I don't want to say not getting better, but it's not looking like that need is going away. It's a great question. Any others? Thanks for putting the links in chat, Ashley. Yeah, and Alyssa, thanks for putting in the chat. A shout out to Steve Tatlow for managing Show Me Response for us. He does a great job. Okay.
Alrighty, well, if there is no more questions, I am putting the link back to all of the courses that we have available back in the chat. And again, these are being recorded. As soon as I can get them on the website, I will have them up. And I hope to hear some more presentations coming up pretty soon. Becky, Alyssa, thank you guys so much for being here. And I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good day.